Music is psychology, see? And if the music does not penetrate the heart, the soul, and the mind, and the body.
He survived police beatings, political backlash, and the wild world of reggae. But what really happened the night Peter Tosh was killed? The truth behind his murder has been buried for decades. And now that it's out, let's just say, it's not the redemption story fans were hoping for. Early years. Most kids shuffled from home to home don't end up founding one of the most powerful reggae groups in history. But Peter Tosh wasn't like most kids. Born Winston Hubert McIntosh in Jamaica's quiet, windswept Westmoreland parish on October 19, 1904, he could have easily faded into the background, just another forgotten name. Instead, he became the thunder to Bob Marley's sunshine, the voice of fire in a genre built on peace. Before he was Peter Tosh, he was a kid passed around between relatives, not out of love, but necessity. His parents had left him behind. By 15, he was basically on his own after the death of his aunt. That's when he moved to Trenchtown, Kingston. This was a place known more for struggle than success, but it was also the gritty training ground for Jamaica's future music revolutionaries. Tosh finished his basic schooling in Bluefields and headed to the capital, where he began welding by day and, as it turns out, sharpening his musical instincts by night. Legend has it, he saw a man playing a guitar in the countryside and just watched. After a few hours of silent study, he picked up the instrument and played the entire tune back flawlessly. No formal lessons, no chord charts, just raw talent and a photographic musical memory. That mix of instinct and grit led him straight to Joe Higgs, the streetwise mentor of many Jamaican artists. Higgs was the kind of guy who didn't need money to teach you music. He needed you to show up and mean it. Peter did. And through Higgs, he met two others who were hungry for something bigger than their surroundings, Bob Marley and Bunny Wailer. The three young men formed a tight bond, and in 1962, they began singing together, practicing harmonies on the dusty sidewalks of Trenchtown. These were not golden studio sessions. They were songs sung into the air, with nothing but their voices and ambition to back them. Joe Higgs drilled them like a coach, teaching them not only how to sing together, but how to listen. It was discipline, but it was also survival. Trenchtown was no joke. You had to be tough, smart, and talented just to stay standing. Peter changed his name to Tosh around this time, probably to mark a clean break from his past. And that name would become part of musical history when the trio became the Wailers, pushing reggae from island sound into global consciousness. But from the start, Tosh was singing songs that told hard truths. While Marley leaned into spirituality and Bunny brought soul, Tosh was the rebel philosopher, unafraid to take aim at governments, systems, and anyone else who got in his way. Even before the big fame hit, Tosh was already carving out his identity. He wasn't trying to be Bob's sidekick or the quiet one in the background. He was intense, unpredictable, and fiercely committed to justice. You could hear it in his lyrics and see it in his posture. He stood tall, literally and figuratively. He was 6'5" after all, and when he spoke, people didn't just listen, they felt it. That early phase of his life, from a discarded child to a street corner singer, set the tone for everything that came after. It's why his later activism made sense. It's why his anger wasn't performative. When he challenged the system, when he demanded respect, not just for him, but for every kid like him who grew up feeling invisible. Music beginnings. Before Bob Marley became a household name, before reggae swept across the globe, there was a group of young Jamaican musicians grinding it out in the streets of Kingston, shaping a sound that would shake the music world. At the heart of this story is Peter Tosh, a self-taught musical powerhouse who didn't just sing. He played, taught, and pushed his bandmates to new heights. By 1964, the group that would become legendary was still known as the Wailing Wailers. Alongside Tosh, Bunny Wailer, and Bob Marley, there were falsetto lead singer Junior Braithwaite and backup singers Beverly Kelso and Cherry Smith. This wasn't a polished pop act. It was a ragtag crew with big dreams and raw talent. But here's the kicker. In the early days, Tosh was the only one who could actually play an instrument. That detail often gets overlooked, but it's huge. Bunny Wailer credits Tosh as the spark that pushed the rest of the group to pick up instruments themselves. Without Tosh's influence, the Wailers might have stayed just a vocal group rather than the powerhouse reggae band they became. Their first major success came with Simmer Down, a ska hit that captured the frustration and hopes of Jamaican youth. The song wasn't just catchy, it was a warning, urging the country's restless teens to cool off and think twice before violence took hold. Ska was the sound of the streets at the time. It was upbeat, fast, and energetic. And the Wailing Wailers rode that wave to early fame. Things shifted quickly, though. By late 1965, Braithwaite, Kelso, and Smith had left, leaving the core trio of Tosh, Bunny, and Marley. Around this time, Bob Marley made a trip to Delaware, USA, to be with his mother. For a brief moment, Marley stepped away from music to work in a Chrysler factory, but it wasn't long before the call of the guitar brought him back home. When Marley returned to Jamaica in early 1967, he came back changed. His time abroad had introduced him to new ideas and a fresh spiritual outlook. This return sparked a turning point, not just for Marley, but for the entire group. Tosh and Bunny were already embracing Rastafari beliefs. This is a spiritual movement that would heavily influence their music and message. Together, the three of them became deeply connected to this faith, which preached peace, resistance to oppression, and African pride. Soon after, the group dropped the wailing from their name and became simply the Wailers. Tosh explained that they chose Wailers because to wail means to express deep feelings, often grief or pain, through vocal cries. This name perfectly captured their mission, to give voice to the struggles and hopes of their people. Tosh wasn't shy about his role in the group's formation. He claimed to be the original Wailer and proudly stated that he taught Bob Marley how to play guitar. Bunny Wailer backed this up, noting that Tosh's self-taught skills helped transform the Wailers from just singers into true musicians. This period was crucial for shaping the band's sound and identity. Tosh's influence pushed the group to experiment with instruments and bring more depth to their music. The three core members' shared Rastafari beliefs began seeping into their lyrics, setting the stage for the revolutionary reggae anthems that would follow. In many ways, Tosh was the quiet engine driving the Wailers' early growth. While Marley later became the global face of reggae, Tosh was laying down the foundation, teaching, leading, and setting the bar high. Without his musical and spiritual influence, the Wailers might have never evolved beyond a vocal harmony group into a band that used music to challenge the status quo. The Wailers. If you think reggae just appeared one day fully formed, think again. It was born from a grind, a shift, and a fierce refusal to stay the same. At the center of this transformation was Peter Tosh, who, along with Bob Marley and Bunny Wailer, helped turn Jamaica's dancehall beats into something that spoke truth to power. In the mid-1960s, Tosh, Marley, and Bunny caught the attention of Danny Sims and Johnny Nash. Sims and Nash signed the trio to an exclusive contract under their Jad Records label, also hooking them up with publishing through Sims's Cayman Music Company. This deal gave the Wailers a foot in the door of the international music scene, but also nudged them to rethink their sound. Though ska ruled Jamaica's streets, Tosh and the crew weren't just about party vibes. They slowed things down to rock steady, a smoother rhythm that made room for heavier messages. Their lyrics started reflecting the realities they saw every day: inequality, oppression, and the struggles tied to their Rastafarian faith. This was music with a cause, not just a beat. The Wailers soon teamed up with legendary producer Lee "Scratch" Perry, a partnership that changed everything. Perry's innovative production helped craft some of the earliest true reggae tracks, like Soul Rebel, Duppy Conqueror, and Small Axe. These songs carried weight. Tosh's voice and songwriting emerged strong, pushing social and political ideas that challenged the status quo. Meanwhile, the rhythm section got a boost when brothers Aston Family Man Barrett on bass and Carlton Barrett on drums joined in 1970. Their tight grooves became the heartbeat of the band. The Wailers recorded The Best of the Wailers with producer Leslie Kong, released in 1971. This album helped solidify their evolving sound, a mix of soulful lyrics and irresistible rhythms. By 1972, the group's recording contract moved to Chris Blackwell's Island Records, a move that would open bigger doors. Island Records dropped Catch a Fire in 1973, a breakthrough album that introduced the Wailers to a global audience hungry for something fresh and real. They followed it up that same year with Burnin', featuring classics like Get Up, Stand Up, a song Tosh co-wrote that became a rallying cry for resistance worldwide. But this rise wasn't without bumps. Tosh's relationship with producers was rocky. Some even released unfinished rehearsal tracks in England under a misspelled name, Peter Tosh, showing how he was sometimes shortchanged or misunderstood. These frustrations only fueled Tosh's fierce independence. 1973 also brought tragedy. While driving home with his girlfriend Yvonne, Tosh's car was struck by a vehicle driving on the wrong side. The crash killed Yvonne and left Tosh with a severely fractured skull. Surviving that, Tosh's spirit only hardened. By 1974, tensions with Island Records boiled over. Chris Blackwell, the label's president, refused to release Tosh's solo album. Tosh and Bunny Wailer, frustrated by what they called unfair treatment, decided to leave the Wailers. Tosh wasn't shy about his feelings for Blackwell. He nicknamed him White Worst in biting defiance. Despite the split, Tosh's influence on reggae couldn't be ignored. He had written or co-written some of the band's biggest hits, including 400 Years and No Sympathy. Launching his solo career, Tosh released albums on major labels like CBS Records and Rolling Stones Records, carrying forward his message of justice, empowerment, and uncompromising truth. This chapter of Tosh's life shows a man who not only helped birth reggae, but did so while battling personal loss, industry roadblocks, and constant pressure to conform. His music became a weapon against injustice and a voice for those left unheard. The shift from ska to rocksteady to reggae wasn't just a change in rhythm. It was a revolution led by artists who refused to settle. Peter Tosh's journey through these years reminds us that behind every great sound is a story of struggle, resilience, and unwavering belief in the power of music to change minds and shake systems. Going solo. When Peter Tosh stepped out on his own in the mid-1970s, he was setting the world on fire with bold ideas and unapologetic truth. His debut album, Legalize It, wasn't just a collection of songs. It became an anthem for a movement, a spark for reggae fans and cannabis advocates alike, and the soundtrack of rebellion for Rastafari communities across the globe. Recorded at the famous Treasure Isle Studios between 1975 and 1976, Legalize It dropped in June 1976 on CBS Records. The title track quickly caught attention. It was a powerful statement calling for the legalization of marijuana. Back then, this wasn't a mainstream stance. Tosh stood firm in his beliefs, championing cannabis not just as a cultural or spiritual practice, but as a symbol of freedom and resistance. His live shows turned into gatherings where fans didn't just listen, they felt part of a cause. To back his solo mission, Tosh assembled a tight band called Word Sound and Power. This crew wasn't just for live shows, they shaped the sound of his albums for years. Their energy matched Tosh's fiery presence, blending roots reggae grooves with a militant edge. His follow-up album, Equal Rights, came out in 1970, doubling down on the messages that had started to define him. Among its standout tracks was a new recording of Get Up, Stand Up, a song co-written with Bob Marley that became a timeless call to action. Another highlight was his cover of Stepping Razor, a fierce anthem that later featured in the cult reggae film Rockers, cementing Tosh's image as a fearless musical warrior. In 1978, Tosh's profile got a serious boost when he signed with Rolling Stones Records, the label owned by none other than Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. The album Bush Doctor was released under their banner, featuring collaborations with the Stones frontmen. The lead single, a cover of The Temptations' Don't Look Back, saw Tosh trading vocals with Mick Jagger himself, introducing him to a wider international audience who might not have heard his voice before. That same year, Tosh took a stand at the iconic One Love Peace concert in Jamaica. As he lit up on stage, he didn't just entertain, he lectured the country's political leaders, Michael Manley and Edward Seaga, calling out their failure to legalize cannabis. Tosh's fearless activism made him a target. Police harassment followed. By September, he was arrested for smoking weed and allegedly attacking an officer. While in custody, Tosh was brutally beaten, suffering a broken hand and head injuries that needed stitches. His defiance didn't come cheap. Tosh continued to release albums that balanced sharp political commentary with strong reggae rhythms. Mystic Man in 1979 and Wanted Dread and Alive in 1981 kept his name in the scene, though his commercial success was modest compared to Marley's meteoric rise. Still, Tosh never compromised his message. After the release of Mama Africa in 1983, Tosh retreated into self-imposed exile. He traveled to Africa seeking spiritual guidance from traditional healers and aimed to break free from contractual binds, especially those involving the distribution of his music in apartheid-era South Africa. Tosh was a vocal critic of apartheid and made his stance clear through music and activism. Songs like Apartheid, Equal Rights, Fight On, and Not Gonna Give It Up echoed his opposition to racial injustice worldwide. His outspokenness and commitment to justice remained undimmed. In 1987, as the reggae world mourned the loss of Bob Marley just a few years earlier, Tosh seemed poised for a comeback. That year, his album No Nuclear War earned him a Grammy Award for Best Reggae Performance. It was a fitting recognition of an artist who never backed down from speaking truth to power. Peter Tosh's solo years weren't about softening his stance to win fans. They were about using every beat and lyric to challenge, inspire, and provoke. His music remains a rallying cry, proving that reggae isn't just about good vibes. It's a voice for change, and Tosh was one of its loudest speakers. Tragic death. Peter Tosh survived political battles, police brutality, and the intense pressures of a music career dedicated to truth and rebellion. But nothing could have prepared him for the brutal night of September 11, 1987, when a chilling act of violence stole one of reggae's fiercest voices forever. Tosh had just returned home to Jamaica, presumably looking forward to some rest, and perhaps the next step in his career or personal life. Instead, his house became the scene of a terrifying home invasion. A group of 3 armed men on motorcycles showed up demanding cash. But this was no ordinary robbery. The gang didn't believe Tosh when he said he didn't have money at the house. What followed was hours of horror. One of the attackers was Dennis Lepo Laubon. Laubon wasn't just any thug. Tosh had known him personally and had even tried to help him find employment after Laubon got out of a long prison term. It's a bitter irony that someone Tosh had once extended a hand to would later be involved in such a tragic act against him. The intruders held Tosh captive, torturing him to force him to reveal where the money was hidden. As friends and associates arrived to check on Tosh or visit, they too were taken hostage. The situation escalated rapidly. When Tosh maintained he had no cash on hand, the attackers began firing recklessly inside the home. In the chaos, Tosh was hit by 2 fatal gunshots to the head. Alongside him, herbalist Wilton Doc Brown and DJ Jeff Free Eye Dixon also lost their lives from injuries suffered during the assault. Several others, Tosh's common-law wife Andrea Marlene Brown, Free Eye's wife Yvonne, Joy, drummer Carlton Santa Davis, and musician Michael Robinson, were wounded but survived. This tragic event sent shockwaves through the music community and beyond. Tosh's death wasn't just a loss of a talented musician, it was the silencing of a powerful voice who had spent his life fighting for justice, equality, and the rights of the oppressed. For a man who had stood against apartheid, colonialism, and systemic violence, to be taken down in such a brutal and personal way added an extra layer of heartbreak to the story. Tosh's life and legacy had always been about standing tall in the face of adversity. Yet, the manner of his death exposed the harsh realities many faced in Jamaica at the time. After all, it was a country struggling with crime, poverty, and political unrest. The very streets that gave birth to reggae also harbored dangers that even legends weren't immune to. In the years following, the story of Peter Tosh's murder became a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the cost of speaking truth to power. His music, however, continues to echo, inspiring generations to rise up and stand firm in their beliefs. Songs like Equal Rights, Get Up, Stand Up, and Legalize It remain as relevant today as ever. Tosh's tragic end didn't erase his impact. Instead, it cemented his place as a martyr of reggae and resistance. He was a man who used his art to challenge oppression until his last breath. Fans and musicians worldwide still honor his contributions, keeping his spirit alive through the music and messages he passionately championed. The night of September 11, 1987, marked a dark moment, not only for Jamaican music, but for all who believed in the power of music as a force for change. Peter Tosh's death was a brutal reminder that even the strongest voices can be targeted, but his legacy proves that real courage and truth never truly die. They live on, louder than any gunfire ever could. What happened after? The music world was stunned when Peter Tosh's life was violently snatched away on that tragic night in 1987. But as the dust settled, a relentless pursuit to bring his attackers to justice sprang into action. What followed was a gripping investigation filled with secrets, confessions, and unexpected twists that eventually brought one of the key suspects to heel. Leading the charge was Detective Senior Superintendent Isidore Dick Hibbert, the man tasked with untangling the brutal crime that had shaken Jamaica's music scene. His team zeroed in quickly, and before long, they apprehended Dennis Lepo Laban. He was a man with a twisted connection to Tosh, who had once tried to help him find work after Laban's release from prison. The breakthrough came thanks to a surprising source: Steve Russell, a taxi driver caught up in the grim events of that night. Russell's confession turned the tide. He admitted that Laban had hired him to ferry 3 men to Tosh's house. Russell swore he had no idea they were planning a violent robbery. He simply drove them and waited nearby as things spiraled out of control. Russell's account painted a terrifying picture. After the gunmen stormed Tosh's home and unleashed gunfire, they rushed back to his taxi with weapons in hand. At Laban's orders, Russell sped away, trying to escape the chaos. But the police were hot on their trail, and the net was closing fast. Things got even more complicated when Russell reached out for advice to Police Constable Leonard Austin. Austin allegedly told him to keep silent about his role, a move that, if true, raised eyebrows about potential cover-ups or missteps in the early investigation. However, Austin denied ever giving such advice when detectives confronted him. This conflicting story only added to the drama surrounding the case. Facing mounting pressure and the grim reality of the murders, Russell made a pivotal choice. The next day, realizing the seriousness of what had happened and fearing for his own safety, he turned himself in and fully cooperated with the police. His detailed testimony became a crucial piece of the puzzle, directly leading to Laban's arrest. This unfolding investigation revealed layers of betrayal and tragedy. Laban wasn't just any criminal, he was someone Tosh had once tried to help. The bitter irony of a friendship turned deadly added a heartbreaking dimension to the case. The quick police response and the cooperation of witnesses like Russell were vital in bringing the killers to justice. But the scars from that night lingered. Tosh's murder was a stark reminder of the dangers and complexities within Jamaican society during that turbulent time. The case also highlighted challenges within the police force and the community. Allegations of officers advising suspects to stay quiet sparked conversations about transparency and accountability in investigations. Yet, despite these hurdles, justice moved forward, showing the determination to honor Tosh's legacy by finding those responsible. Beyond the courtroom drama, this episode underscored how closely intertwined Tosh's world was with the harsh realities of his environment. The violence that ended his life was rooted in a society grappling with crime, economic hardship, and social unrest, which was a world Tosh had often called out through his music. In the end, the manhunt and capture of Dennis Lepo Laban brought some measure of closure to a painful chapter. It reminded fans and fellow artists that while Tosh's voice was silenced in life, his story and message would live on, fueling calls for justice, peace, and change long after the gunfire faded. Laban's trial and sentencing. The brutal killing of Peter Tosh shocked the world, but the hunt for justice brought its own twists and turns that kept the story alive far beyond the courtroom. The man most directly held responsible for Tosh's death was Dennis Lepo Laban, whose trial became a battleground of conflicting testimonies, bitter accusations, and unresolved questions. Laban's defense leaned heavily on an alibi, accusing 2 key witnesses of having personal grudges against him. He claimed their testimonies were fueled by spite rather than truth. Yet, the court saw through these attempts. Despite Laban's unusual choice to take the stand and speak for himself, a rare move in murder trials, his explanations didn't hold water. Ultimately, he was convicted for the murders of Tosh, Free Eye, and Wilton Brown. The trial wasn't a clean sweep of justice, though. Steve Russell, the taxi driver who transported the gunman to and from Tosh's home, was acquitted. Russell's lawyer successfully argued that, while he had driven the men, he had no knowledge or involvement in the crime itself. The court accepted this, giving Russell a clean slate despite his close proximity to the violence. Laban didn't accept the verdict quietly. He appealed his conviction, but in 1990, the Court of Appeal dismissed his case, calling the prosecution's evidence powerful and affirming the original judgment. His death sentence was eventually reduced in '95 to life imprisonment, and he remains behind bars in Kingston's Tower Street Adult Correctional Center. But even with Laban behind bars, the full story remains frustratingly incomplete. He has never disclosed the names or whereabouts of the 2 other gunmen who took part in the attack. These shadowy figures have never been caught or publicly identified, leaving a glaring hole in the narrative. This missing piece has fueled speculation and conspiracy theories for decades. Was Tosh's murder a simple robbery gone wrong, or was there a darker motive? Some suggest that Tosh's fierce political activism, his vocal opposition to corruption, inequality, and oppressive regimes, made him a target for powerful enemies. Jamaica in the 1980s was no stranger to political tension, and Tosh's outspoken views could have made him a dangerous figure to some. Others think the crime was more personal, a bitter betrayal by Laban, whom Tosh had once helped reintegrate into society after prison. The chaotic and violent nature of the robbery, coupled with Laban's attempts to discredit Tosh's wife during the trial, hinted at deeper grudges mixed with greed. Whatever the truth, the unanswered questions keep the memory of that night alive in the minds of fans and historians alike. The silence about the other 2 assailants adds a haunting layer to the tragedy, reminding us that justice can sometimes be partial and imperfect. Peter Tosh's death was not just the loss of a brilliant musician, it was the silencing of a relentless voice for justice. His legacy continues to inspire those fighting oppression around the globe. While his murder remains shrouded in mystery, the spirit of his music and message remains clear, a call to stand up, speak out, and demand change. A rebel's voice may be silenced, but his message never fades. Peter Tosh stood for truth, justice, and resistance, and his death left a hole that still echoes through reggae and activism alike. As the mystery lingers, so does his legacy, urging us to keep questioning, keep fighting, and keep listening. One bullet silenced a legend, but it couldn't kill the message. Peter Tosh's voice still echoes through every speaker, protest, and rising tide of truth seekers around the world. Though justice found Dennis Laban, many believe the full story remains buried under politics, betrayal, and secrets that may never surface. Was it just a robbery, or something darker, deeper, and deliberately covered up? What we do know is this: Peter Tosh gave everything to speak up for the voiceless. And even in death, his legacy lives on louder than ever. His courage, music, and uncompromising truth-telling still light fires in the hearts of rebels, dreamers, and fighters. So, the mystery may linger, but the man, he's eternal. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe Peter Tosh deserves to be remembered for the revolutionary he was. And let us know, do you think the whole truth has really come out?